To start our project, we're going to begin by working on the upper ends of our necklace rope. And we'll be using strictly the 10-0 check glass seed beads in the Midnight. To begin, we're just going to be doing some tubular herringbone for these pieces of our necklace. And we're going to start out by building our base rows of a 2-bead ladder. So we're going to start by picking up 4. We're going to carry our beads down. And we're going to leave ourselves about a 4 to 5 inch tail. You're going to take your needle, pass back up through the very first 2 seed beads you picked up, pull your thread through, and that positions your second 2 beads right beside the first 2 beads. Now we're going to come down through the second 2, then we're going to lock this stitch. We're going to pass back up through the first 2, and then to get into position to add our next beads, we need to come right back down through those second 2. So our working thread and our tail thread are now on the same side of the beadwork. We'll pick up our next 2. We're coming out of the bottom of those 2 seed beads. We're going to go from top to bottom through the same 2. This is just basic ladder stitch, only using 2 beads at a time. So now we're coming out the bottom of the middle 2 beads. We'll go up through the 2 seed beads we just added. That's our 3. We'll pick up 2. We're coming out the top, so we take our needle and go up from bottom to top through our previous 2 seed beads to add the next 2. Get into position by passing down through the 2 new beads. Now we have 4 rows, so we have 2 more to do. We'll pick up our next 2. We're coming out of the bottom, so we take the needle, we come from top to bottom through those seed beads of row 4, position the 2 new beads so they sit beside, come up through the 2 new seed beads. We have our last 2. We're coming out of the top this time, so we'll go from bottom to top through the previous 2. Then we'll come from top to bottom through the 2 we just added. So now we have our little 6 rows of ladder stitch 2 beads high. So now we have to close these up into a tube. So we're coming out of the bottom of row 6. We're going to go from bottom to top through row 1. And when we pull, we're going to pull this so that we form a little U shape. Now if you'll notice, my tail thread and working thread are coming out of opposite ends of this first row. We need to add a thread bridge between row 1 and row 6. So we're going to come from top to bottom through the 2 beads on our row 6, our very last row. Pull it through. And then we're going to come right back up through the 2 beads on row 1 again. Pull everything nice and snug. And we have our base row of ladder stitch beads already formed into our tubular shape. And now we can begin our tubular herringbone. Now for this portion, what we're going to do is we're going to do 100 rows of tubular herringbone stitch. And I found it the easiest way to do this without losing your place is to set out 10 piles of 10 seed beads each. So that's our 100. In order for us to be able to keep up, we're only going to pick from our pile, so this is our first 10, we're going to pick up the first bead of each row from over here. So there's 1 bead, then I've got all these sitting here, and I'll just use these for the remainder of the beads I need. So there's 2, because we need 2 beads for herringbone. So we're coming out of the top of row 1, we're going to come down 1 bead on row 2. We have our first little herringbone stitch. We roll our little tube around, pass up through the top bead on the 3rd row to get into position. Pull your thread through. Now we're going to pick the remainder of our beads up from our big pile over here. So we're going to pick up our 2, come down that top bead on the 4th row, pull your beads into position, pass up through the top bead of row 5, now we're going to pick up our last 2 beads for this first row. So we've got our 2. We're coming out of the top of row 5. We're going to go down that top bead of row 6. Situate the beads so that they look nice and they're sitting catty corner beside of each other. So now you'll notice we have 2 beads to go up. Every time we come to the end of our row and we've done our last stitch of herringbone, we will step up by going up through those 2 beads right here. If you get lost, you can see where this thread is coming out. You could take your thread and bring it towards the side like that, straight over, and that will show you which beads you need to go up. So we're going up through that bead, the top bead of our base row, plus the bead from the very first stitch that we added in this round. So at the end you go up 2. You pull everything into position, and now we're ready for our next row. So now I'm going to pick up over here out of my pile of 10 and pick up just 1 bead, and then pick up from my big pile the remaining 5. So I've got 2 on my needle. I'm going to go down the top bead of the previous row, up the top bead of the next column. Pick up 2 from our large pile, go down the next bead over the top 1. This is our stitch for this column 2. And we got to go up 1 bead of column 3. And pick up our last 2 seed beads for this round. We'll sew down through the top bead to the right, position our beads as we work, and then we're going to step up and get into position by stepping up through 2 on row 1. Something I'd like to just bring up, as we did our ladder stitch, we built our rows going from right to left or left to right. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now as we're working our tubular herringbone, our rows are being added going up. But we're in herringbone, you have your columns. So this is column 1, column 2, and column 3. And this is row 2. So now we're ready for row 3. I'll show you a couple more. We'll pick up from our stack of 10, the first bead, and pick the other one up from our pile over here. We're coming out of the top of this column, the top left. We're going to go down the top right. It'll be reversed if you're right-handed. We need to step up into column 2 by passing up through the top bead. We're going to pick up the remainder beads for this row from over here. So pick up 2, go down the next one, make sure your beads situate nicely. They should look like these little fanned out columns. We've got to step up into our 3rd column by coming up through the top bead. Then we're going to add our last stitch of this row. So we'll pick up 2, we'll come down that bead to the right, sure our beads look nice. And we have to step up through 2 once again. Now you will probably wind up having to add thread. I started out with a pretty good wingspan of my beading thread, but when it gets to the point where I need to add thread, I will show you guys how to do that. So let's just keep working. I'll show you one more row. We're going to pick up 2. We're coming out of the top of the left-sided bead of column 1, so we're going to go down the right-sided bead. Position our beads so that our stitch looks nice. Then step up into our second column over here by coming up through that top bead only. We're going to pick up over here, from over to the left, out of our large pile for the remainder of the row. So I've picked up 2. I'm coming down the bead to the right on the second column. And then I'm going to step up through the top bead of the third column. And my beads are causing a little bit of a glare today. So now I have to finish this last stitch on this row, so I pick up from the large pile, come down the top bead, pull my beads into position. You'll notice how I roll the tube around. So now my thread is coming out of this bead at the bottom, so I know it's time to step up through 2 because I'm at the end of my row. So I'm going to go up those 2 beads on column 1. And pull my thread into position. And folks, that's all I'm going to be doing until I've done these 100 rows. Now, I'm going to go ahead and work for a little bit, and when I need to add thread, I'll come back and I'll show you guys how to add thread. Here's just a little tip about, anytime you're making a beaded rope, one of the most important things to remember as you're working along is try to keep your tension nice and even on each row and each stitch. Like I'm going to be taking the first stitch of this row. So as I'm coming down, I pick up my 2 beads and I take my first stitch. I want to make sure my beads are positioned to look like the little catty corner each time and give a nice little tug before I step up to column 2. Give that a nice little tug. You want to make sure that you don't have loose thread between your columns, but you don't want it so tight that it bunches everything together like this. So give it just a little tug before I step up into column 3. And then I'm going to take my last stitch, pick up my 2 beads, come down the bead on the other bead of column 3. You make sure that you position your beads each time and give a little tiny tug, just like that, before you step up. So I'm at the end of that row, so I have to step up my 2. And we'll get it eventually. Okay, so I'm stepping up my 2. And if you'll notice here how nice and even everything looks, the tension is the same. There's no gaps or loose spots, and it just flows and looks really nice and smooth. So if you notice as you're working along that your stitches seem to kind of want to twist around a little bit, that's because your working thread is getting coiled up just a little. So all you need to do is just drop your needle, grab your working thread right through here, and pull gently along through here and get the twist out of your thread. You can do that a couple of times, or I can't show you here. You can just hold on to your needle and drop the beadwork towards the floor and straighten the thread that way. But it's just as easy to do it this way, and just pull it through a couple of times like that to get the the natural curvature out of your thread as you work. So I've been working right along on my rope, and my working thread is getting a little bit short. So I'm going to show you how to add some additional thread. I'm just now finishing my very last stitch of this current row that I'm on. And I stepped up through my 2 seed beads of column 1. And I like to be coming out of column 1, if possible, for this part of ending the thread, because I'm going to show you how to weave it off. So I want to make sure that when I get done weaving this thread in, I want my thread to be coming out of column 1 once again as it is right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go down, no beads on, we're just weaving our thread. We're going to come down through 3 or 4 beads on the right next to us, so it's still in column 1, but the second bead over. So I'm coming down 4. So I'm going to pull my thread up through there. Then I'm going to pass back up through the 4 beads on the left-hand side of my column 1 beads. And that's just going to lock my thread in place before, so I know it's nice and secure, and if I didn't even do anything any further, it would be probably okay. But I'm going to work my way around these top sets of beads. But I don't want to create an additional thread bridge here that wouldn't normally be created when I was working my regular herringbone. So in order not to create that additional thread bridge yet, we have to use 2 beads. So I'm going to come right back down the top 2 beads on the second part of my column 1. So that when I step up through these 2 beads to the right on column 2, my thread bridge is matching the thread bridge that's already there. Then I'm going to come down 2 or 3 beads here on this column 2 on the bead to the right. I'm going to lock that in by going up the 3 beads to the left. Now I'm going to move over into this column, but I've got to come down just 2 beads to the right again. And I'm going to step up through the 2 beads of column 3. I'm going to go down a couple of beads, like 2 or 3. On column 3 to the right. Step back up those same number of beads to the left of column 3. Now I need to move back into column 1, so I'm going to go down 2 beads, and then up the 2 of column 1 right there. So now I know that that thread is locked in really well, and I can go ahead and take that off of my needle. So what I'll do is I'm going to thread on a new piece of thread, and then I'll show you how to stitch your new thread in. So now I have my little piece of my working thread coming out of that top bead of column 1, and I've got my needle threaded with a nice long new piece. And I'm going to show you how to weave this in, because once the thread is woven in, we want to be exiting in the same place as this thread so we can begin beading from the correct spot. So in order to do that, I'm going to just go ahead and, you'll see I've got these 2 beads are column 1. I'm going to flip this around till I have the 2 beads of column 3 facing up. I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to start about 3 or 4 beads back from the bottom, and I'm going to push out to the top just like that. And I'll pull this all the way through until I leave myself just a nice little small piece of tail. On this particular part, we just need a little piece, just enough to hold on to. See, I'm coming out of that top bead on the left of my 3rd column. I'm going to go down through 4 beads here on the right hand side of this column so that I can lock this stitch in place. Just like that. Hold on to your tail thread as you pull this through. Make sure you don't get your other working thread hung up. So now I'm holding onto that tail thread, and I've pulled that all the way through. So now in order to lock it, I'm going to have to go right back up through those first 4 seed beads to the left, just like I did at the beginning. And that creates a little, kind of a little lock on your thread, so you don't have to worry about your tail thread coming out as bad. So now I'm going to pull that into position. You'll notice my tail thread will still move just a little, but I'm not going to tug out. Just want to make sure it's nice and firm, but, not pull extremely hard. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just repeat that step. I'm going to come down some beads, And in this case, I think I came down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It doesn't really matter because we're just going to weave this thread in just a little bit and keep locking it in. So as long as I come down without skipping any, I'm good. Now to see where I want to go up, I can just take my thread. You can see that it's coming out of that bead right there. If I pull it directly to the side, that lets me know right above that thread is where I want to insert my needle to go back upwards. Now this time, instead of going all the way to the top, I'm just going to go up a few beads. So I'm going to go up 3 in this instance. There's no magic number. What we're doing is we're just weaving in and out, and locking the thread in place each time so that we can know for sure that, you know, our new working thread is locked in good. In that, we don't have to worry about it coming loose. So I'm going to go down 2. So I'm coming out of this bead right here. I can take my thread, pull it straight to the side, and see that the bead I want to go down into is right below it now, below the thread. So I'm just going to push in and come down a few beads. And because of that zigzagging up and down, this new thread is locked in secure, and we can go ahead and cut off this little tiny piece of tail thread here and get rid of it. But now we want to make sure we're coming out of the, we're down here on our row. Where we want to come out is up here on the same top bead of row 1, where our working thread, our old working thread is. But in order to do that, first we have to go back up. So I'm coming out right here. I'm going to take my thread, pull it straight across. That lets me know that I need to go up through this bead. And this time as I go up, I'm going to go through all the beads and come out of the top. Just like that. I'm going to pull this thread all the way through, let it cinch into place. Now I'm going to just simply come down 2 beads to the right. Pull that through. And you'll notice that my 3 little herringbone columns are still looking like they should, and the thread bridges are in the right place. So as we pass up these 2 beads to the right in column 1, our thread bridge is still going to be in this correct position that it needs to be as we work on adding more beads. So now I can get rid of my old thread, and I probably should have done that before I went up through those 2 beads, but we can just cut off that old thread and get rid of that. And now we're in a position to go ahead and start picking up our beads and build onto our herringbone, just like we've been doing. Now I've got about 35 rows left to do. I know this because I have 3 piles of 10 and 5 left in this pile here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and continue on until I get to the end of my strip, and I'll meet you guys back. So I finished up with my 100 rows on this piece that I've been working on with you all. And I've made it, I started out, I already had 1 piece made. And what you'll want to do is go ahead and make you a second piece. On your first piece, weave your thread, leave yourself a pretty good piece of thread. Don't cut it really close to your beadwork because potentially you could lose, some beads off. So I left myself about a 6 or 7 inch tail there off of this piece, and I cut it. Then I started over again, and I made this piece. And once I've gotten my 100 rows on, I'm going to leave my working thread connected to this piece. So go ahead and get both of your pieces finished up, and we'll get started on the rest of our necklace.